Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of This is HCD. My name is Jerry Scullion and I'm a human-centered service design practitioner based in the beautiful city of Dublin, Ireland. Today on the show, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Gary David, a design sociologist from Bentley University in America in the US. And in this conversation, we speak about absolutely everything. Now, I was really interested and it piqued my interest about design sociology. What does that really mean? He hosts his own podcast called Experience by Design, and he spent 26 years watching workplaces evolve from every dorm room has an Ethernet port to please close your laptops. We get into AI as a hammer in the wrong hands and why approving an entire stack of medical records with one click might not be the UX win that it looks like, and what designers actually need to do when leadership isn't convinced that their work matters. We really spoke at length about that. What does the future of work look like around AI? I know it's a great conversation because I've managed to, be part of it, but it's really suitable and it's prevalent for the world that we're in at the moment, where we're seeing lots and lots of introductions of AI into organizations. Sometimes it's not the right outcome. It's not the outcome that they've potentially hoped for. And Gary is the person to really talk to about these kind of situations. I know you're going to love it. Let's jump straight in. Gary, how do you describe what you do and your experience and where you're from? Imagine we just bumped into each other at a dinner party and they're like, hey, this is my mate Gary. How do you respond?
Well, if I was at a dinner party, I'd probably be standing alone in a corner, not talking to anybody, but that would not make for an interesting podcast, unfortunately. So we'll pretend I'm social. So I have a sociology background, a PhD in sociology, and also an undergraduate degree in psychology, which essentially means nothing other than I took, 9 classes or whatever it was, but was interested in understanding people always, right? What makes people tick. That's always been what I've been interested in. And I just found with sociology that I can do that on scale, right? Where psychology, the unit of analysis might be an individual. Mm-hmm. For sociology, the unit of analysis is more than one individual. It could be 2 people. It could be entire societies. So for me, sociology just becomes a handy tool to understand the world around me, whether it be on a small micro level or a large macro level or the meso level in between. That's what drew me to sociology originally.
It's interesting you call it a tool.
Yeah.
How do you find the tool? Is it something that you have and that's it? Or is it something that is constantly evolving?
I always like to think that there's, to use a simplification, 3 kinds of people. Those are who are naturally good at something, those who could be good with additional training and effort, and those who should probably stay the hell away from it. So that's for anything, right? And so, I used to run marathons. I trained a lot. No matter how much I trained, I was never going to be at the front of the Boston Marathon, right? It's just not there. But at the same time, I had enough talent to get away with being relatively decent. And so I think as a tool, sociology is something that is unique in that we are all sociologists of a sort. If you are a competent social being, you have to be a sociologist because you have to continually adapt to context and situation as you move through life. Then sociology becomes about turning what we already know into something that we're aware of, and then also elevating those skills.
Of those 3 different types of people that you said about, staying the hell away from it.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in that category that you think should stay the hell away from sociology?
Yeah, I do actually. I mean, I think that for the way I do sociology and the way I think you get closer to human experience and phenomena is by engaging directly with people. Or those who just aren't good at engaging directly with people. I'm teaching a class on right now, ethnography for experience design. And when you're doing ethnography, engaging in the world, talking with people, being outside of the usability lab, you really have to be flexible. You have to adjust. You have to take things in stride. You have to be a bit of a salesperson to get people interested in what you're trying to do. So there's a lot of quote unquote people skills involved in being a sociologist, because especially as a tool, we're trying to do something with it because ultimately you're engaging with people. And anytime you engage with people, that's tricky business, which is different than I'm going to put out a survey through Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey or something like that, and then just, wait for the results to roll in. That's a skill too. I'm not diminishing it, but it's a different skill set than having to go out and engage with people.
And converse and, explain to people and interact with people. So can we just go back to that third segment if you want? Is it fair to say then that transfers to design as well, like in design research in particular? Is there a segment that you believe maybe is best not suited to practice?
Not necessarily. I think, if you take design as a process and there's various points along the way of that process, there's plenty of jobs for everyone to do, right?
Yeah.
We just talked about, coding. I don't know what I'm doing. I would love to have an engineer work with me.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I want the engineer to go out doing other stuff where another person, that the very nature of a corporation is to have people who have specialized skill sets that are working together in some coordinated way to achieve some kind of outcome.
Yeah.
This is like we have creatives trying to do their own operations. Walt Disney needed Roy Disney. Steve Jobs needed Steve Wozniak. So you need the right people for the right job. And luckily in the design process, there are enough slots for different kinds of people to engage and work together. I think that's where the key part of it, work together to achieve an outcome.
Now, before we started recording, we were talking a little bit more around people from different perspectives. It could be political leanings. It could be belief systems that really can hinder conversations and relationships to blossom. I come from Ireland, and there has been a period of our history we refer to as the Troubles that really brought peace to the island of Ireland. And it's not perfect, but it works at the moment and has worked for the last 25 years. I'd love to get your understanding, because America is in a kind of a sticky situation at the moment. And I was conversing with a few different practitioners, and they were talking about how difficult it would be to go to America and maybe start working alongside people who think very, very differently to how they see the world at the moment. As a sociologist, I'd love to get your perspective on that and how you can actually prepare for working with known knowns and people who maybe think radically different to how you see the world.
Yeah, I think one of the key things to think about is what are deal breakers in terms of the divergence of opinion or thought or ideology. So take, for instance, there's a whole sub-segment of folks who might say something like, empathy is overrated. Empathy is a weakness. This kind of toxic masculinity on the internet, that empathy is a bad thing. Well, okay. Like that's kind of a non-starter since it's a foundational aspect of what it is we do. Right. So like, empathy is weakness. Well, all right. I guess we really can't do a whole lot more, can we? So you take it like at that extreme, and then you move into, what's the difference of opinion? What's the deal breaker? One of the things that I did was I looked at software development teams around the world. And we looked at not just when people usually do that kind of work, they're like, well, how are the Indians different than the Americans? I even did it in Ireland, right? The Irish are different than the Americans and the Indians. Well, if you start from a foundation of difference, you can find differences. Okay, let's flip that. What do we have in common? Can we create a situation in which the salience of shared identity becomes more elevated? And so I engaged in a number of exercises that were based in sociology around how can we surface the things we hold in common so that we can align around those things and not focus on the social distance that exists. It's what I call a pronoun progression, going from us and them orientation to a you and I orientation. Yeah, the Irish I don't like, but Jerry, he's all right. He's one of the good ones.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. To the we orientation, which is we have a lot in common despite these other things. So can you find that alignment around something shared? And is there a deal breaker that if somebody is against empathy, well, I can't really work with you. Or if they have some prejudicial attitudes or something that doesn't work, if they were completely Irish, well, there's not much I can do there.
One of the theories around this is you just don't go to the areas where you know that there's going to be kind of a large difference. I'm
Right.
not entirely sure if that's the right approach. How do you work towards setting those boundaries at the start of those kind of relationships, in your opinion?
Well, I think about Anthony Bourdain, right?
Mm.
The great Anthony Bourdain, who
Yeah.
would travel around to places that, had different opinions than him and would
Yeah.
engage with them directly around a shared experience, right? Which is eating.
Mm.
Eating is a foundational human experience that
Yeah.
brings people together. It's a reason why we call it breaking bread together, right? The Last Supper. The act of eating together figures prominently in human history.
Yeah.
So, all right, we can go to that level. Now, again, if somebody is against my existence,
Mm-hmm.
I can try to humanize them, humanize myself to them, and people try it all the time. I can try to find commonality and bridge gaps, or I can just say, screw you. Like, why is it my job to convince you that I'm human? And
Yeah.
so I think I don't want to be evasive, but it does depend on the context and the severity. Real quick, United States, for Black Americans, there's a thing called the Green Book, which would indicate to Black American families or individuals traveling in the United States where you could stay, where you could go, where you should avoid, right? And
Yeah.
so once again, is it your job to go into a place that doesn't like me and convince them that they should, or should I just maybe choose my friends more wisely?
Mm.
Versus work, and this is why I study work, which is if we're thrown together, now how do we build workplace communities around shared elements and see that we're all in this kind of together?
Yeah.
Looking at situations and contexts that draw people into with a shared identity and group relationship in mind so that we can work together collaboratively to achieve some goal.
Your expertise and your focus within Bentley, where you're working in the States, is in the design sphere, the experience design. You've got a faculty there. What do you see as being the biggest challenges for designers when they're going into organizations that maybe don't really understand or accept the strategic nature of design? What advice do you give to people in that space?
I would say, again, it depends on what kind of design. So if it's UX or customer experience or employee experience
Anything
or
within
brand,
strategic.
yeah,
So,
it becomes tricky because, like, take UX, for example.
yeah.
And I'm not a UX designer. I'm not a UX professional. I teach in a UX program, which is an interesting story, but I'm not formally trained as a UX person.
Yeah.
So is UX positioned at the beginning of a product lifecycle or at the end? Right?
Yeah.
If it's at the end, well, it's not necessarily strategic. It's additive, in my opinion, where
Yeah.
we're trying to say, well, we built the thing. Now we should probably take a look and see if it works. Well, it doesn't work in these ways. Oh, too late, out of budget.
Yeah. Tick box done.
Yeah, right. Versus, are we at the beginning of it where we are really looking at the research these individuals are providing to guide our decision making, which is more strategy? Is it just enhancing something we already do to increase our productivity? Or is it causing us to rethink our direction in a fundamental way?
Yeah.
And, I think, how do you change people's minds? That's the ultimate question. Customer experience professionals dealing with the same thing. I had a podcast episode where, I asked my guest, who's a CX professional, given the amount of customer experience material in the world today, more than ever in human history, why are people still not sure of its ROI? It's like the more stuff we put out, they're still not sure. There seems to be something else going on here, right? Why is there a disconnect? And that goes into, I think, a more fundamental question around business education or the culture of business. That if you have to convince people in leadership that your customers, your users, your employees are important, that's a fundamental problem.
Yeah.
And so I think that in some respects, changes in leadership or changes in how we do business education becomes the important place to start.
Yeah. Gary, you mentioned that you've been in Bentley for 29 years. Okay.
26.
Right?
Yeah.
No,
26.
26. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long, kind of period where you've seen a lot of change. How have you seen the workplace evolve since you started in Bentley, and where do you feel we're at right now? I'd love to get your thoughts on that question.
At least in my workplace, I can talk about it quickly, kind of give it some context. I mentioned this to class the other day. When I first started in 1999, my school branded itself as every student has a laptop and they
Yeah.
can bring their laptop to class to enhance their learning. And that in every dorm room, we have a port per pillow. So we said an Ethernet port
Love it.
that you can plug into because Wi-Fi not so good. And so
Yeah.
we are going to advance business education through the integration of technology into the classroom, right?
Yeah.
Today, don't open your laptops. Keep them
Yeah.
in your bag because they are distracting you from being able to focus on what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And so I've seen this thing go full circle where we got to bring technology into the classroom. And now that we have technology into the classroom, how do we get it out? To the point
Yeah.
where professors are going, we're going to do in-class writing assignments without laptops. You have to actually write, which is kind of a challenge for some of my students because they don't learn cursive anymore.
Right.
And so we're kind of going back to analog.
Yeah.
It's almost like people, hipsters buying albums. We're going back to analog. And I think
Absolutely.
that we're kind of wrestling with, sure, we have these advanced tools, but like the monkey with the hammer, are we deploying them in a way that's constructive and not destructive?
You think this is a positive or negative? I'd love to get your
Which part,
perspective on
giving a monkey a hammer?
the return. Like there is a shift. I'm seeing it, like, and I'm feeling it myself. Like, the return to the iPod and the return to writing, and very much tactile kind of approaches.
Nobody wants, and no one's going to know what this is probably, but no one wants to put an 8-track player back in their car.
Of course they do. People who listen to this podcast, as much as I'd like to think that there's,
they want an 8-track that goes ka-chunk in the middle of the song.
I know, yeah. Like even I was even looking at it the other day. I was like, I didn't realize we have 2 cars. One of the cars is a CD player, and we've recently moved house, and we were having an argument over whose CDs these were. Okay, me and my wife, and it turns out they were mine. Okay, and they were the ones that I'd accumulated when I was in Australia. I still don't know where the other ones are. I've got hundreds and hundreds of other ones, and my children were like fawning over this box. And they ran out into the car when I was taking them out, a couple of weeks ago, and they had a stack of CDs and they wanted me to put them on and listen to them. They were, going through, they'd never seen CDs before.
Right.
And I can see that same sort of behavior trickling through into many generations, myself included. I found myself flicking through the CDs, and it's just so better. It's so much better to be able to feel these things.
And liner notes were a thing of the past, right? That liner notes used to be the thing on an album that you'd read, that you could, the people who wrote the liner notes, that was a whole art form. And I think for any of this, right, it's the right tool for the right job. It's what we might call like a bricolage approach. That what's the right tool for the right job? And so for designers, or for any, we're all designers of some sort. In the classroom when I'm teaching, I'm designing an experience, right?
Yeah.
What is the right tool for the right job? Not that you can't use laptops in the classroom, but when should we use laptops? Not that you can't use AI, but when should you use AI? Not that you shouldn't listen to a CD, but you know what? You don't want to go out listening to a CD while you're jogging. Trust me, we tried. It didn't work out well.
No.
I would much rather listen to my phone because it's not going to skip. I'm certainly not going to lug around a record player when I'm out for a jog. So what's the right tool for the right job? And we have to achieve a level of maturity in our strategy, not just to chase the next shiny key or the next bright widget, and to think more intentionally about what's the right tool for the right job, and how do we know it's the right tool for the right job? Well, we have to look at the outcomes.
Yeah. Am I right in saying that in your area of expertise is workplace studies and sociology?
Yep.
In the current world that we're all living in, like the advent of AI, it's seemingly extremely difficult for graduating students in design now to access the workplace. The challenges are there. What used to be 50 applicants for a graduate position are now closer to 500. So it's much more difficult to catch that first break. And it's extremely important for the industry to be able to give those first breaks to designers. Otherwise, we'll lose them to other disciplines. What are those challenges for the the lucky designers who get into the workplace at the moment? What challenges are they facing in your experience and your academic experience that are out there in the professional world? What can they do about it?
Yeah, I think that immediately comes to mind is demonstrating worth, which is the age-old question.
Yeah.
How do we demonstrate that what we're doing is worth it and is strategic and not just a checkbox? And I've seen this, whether it be customer experience or user or employee, a student experience and the like. Patient experience might be a little bit different, at least in the United States, because hospital patient scores can be pegged to earnings, or to reimbursement. So there is some, skin in the game regarding those scores. But, otherwise, if my customers aren't happy, but they're returning, do I care? Well, how do you make that argument? Again, if you're trying to make an argument to a C-level person that you should care about your customers and they're not convinced inherently that it's a good thing automatically, then that's a tough challenge to overcome. So I think that, as always, we have to peg our role to returns that matter to the people who make decisions. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the game. However, we also have to be in a position to educate about other things that matter, that we can expand beyond and to show, if not, there's many kinds of ROI, not just profitability. And so how do we start to educate, whether as individuals, as educational institutions, or as professional organizations, that these things matter in these various ways. And if you adopt these kinds of strategies, then we will perform at a level beyond our competition. And so building those cases becomes critically important, which is the challenge we've been doing. This is not a new challenge, but I don't think that challenge is gone away. I think also the fewer people there are always in any situation, the more that those fewer people now stand for everybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you're like the only Irish person I know, all Irish people become you. It's your responsibility. So the fewer people, the greater the responsibility to carry the reputation of a field, fortunately.
It's brilliant to hear that there's a design practice in the States in particular that are teaching sociology within that faculty. I'm not too sure because I'm not too close to design academia, but is that a normal kind of introduction to bring sociology into the design faculty?
Nah, not at all. I think I'm probably an unusual one in many ways, as people will tell you. But, design work,
Join the club.
It depends what you mean by design work, right? So at least in UX, more psychologically rooted, not surprisingly. Human-computer interaction, a lab, cognitive processes, all the stuff. So it's very psychology. I began teaching in my program because the founder of our program, Dr. Bill Gribbons, is now retired. He's like, "Oh, you're an ethnographer." "Yeah." "Can you teach ethnography?" "Sure." "Can you teach it to graduate students in UX?" Our program is called Human Factors. And I said, "Sure." I had no idea what UX was. Not a clue. And so I just started this process of teaching. This is about maybe 17 or 18 years ago, teaching this graduate class in ethnography for UX students without having any clue what any of this stuff was. Now, I was an applied and clinical sociologist, so I was familiar with applying what I know to create solutions for people.
Yeah.
And so I was doing design work, but I wouldn't have called it design work at the time. It was later on, I'm like, oh, okay, I get this.
Yeah.
And so it is unusual, but I think it's probably because sociology doesn't train sociologists in communicating to a broader audience beyond ourselves.
Yeah. And to qualify that within research, which is a large part of design, we probably touch on a lot of aspects that are within the sociology kind of faculty. But to have a dedicated sociology piece within the program is something that I'm like, well, that's actually pretty cool.
Well, let's look at, for instance, I'll talk about HCI. How many of my students have heard of HCI? All of them. All right. How many of you have heard of computer-supported cooperative work? None. This comes out of Scandinavia in the 90s, right? CSCW. And that's inherently sociological and ethnographic. And it's always been there. But I think that, especially in the United States, if I was going to be an armchair, sociologist for a second, our culture is so predicated on the elevation of the individual
Yeah.
that the collective gets lost. And so the
Mm.
sociology of things gets lost because we spend so much time talking about single persons rather than entire groups.
Mm. Okay. So explain that a little bit more. I've heard the term before, but I want you to go into it a little bit more around what that gives the student and where that kind of gives them a super or maybe an edge when they're looking for a job. I'm interested in that aspect.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example from my own research on electronic health record systems. So from a UX standpoint, we might look at the user interface, the user experience, what individual healthcare professionals go through when using a electronic medical record system. Okay?
Yeah.
Fine, fair enough. So we can test it in the lab and look at the colors and look at the button size and look at the placement and figure out the workflow and all that kind of good stuff. That doesn't matter necessarily about how they're going to use it when the technology fundamentally changes relationships and power in these organizations. So it used to be the case that doctors could largely author the medical records themselves to suit their own needs.
Wow.
Now, who's in charge of it? Well, it's not the doctor, it's the people in the, information systems part of the organization that are dictating to doctors before you can order a test, you need to have these boxes checked. Or if you want, not only is this going to be visible to you, but it's going to be visible to anybody else with access to the system. One time I was asking my daughter's pediatrician when I was doing this research, can you have an electronic medical record, right? He's like, yeah. Can any other doctor see your patient's records? And he said, no, why would I want that? And I said, well, why wouldn't you want that? He's like, well, if anybody wants to look at my patient's medical records, I want to know why and what the situation is so I can understand what's happening. Okay, now we're getting into social relationships, right?
Yeah.
If billing and reimbursement is influencing what's in the electronic medical record system and how doctors are using it, it no longer becomes principally about clinical care, and it becomes about something else. Now we're into a larger systems consideration. You're hearing more and more people talk about systems design, systems engineering, collaborative systems. So when you go from the human computer interaction into systems, that jump is sociology, right? And that's where the sociologist is now situated to think about the broader impacts and the interconnections of technological design and use.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many questions I have about that one particular one. Going back to your pediatrician, was there a follow-on discussion after that about why? Others, like, do you get into the whole kind of like, well, it might be nice for other people to be able to see and make sure that there's trust and transparency to that you're doing the right thing. What followed on that conversation? Can you remember?
Well, he basically was talking about how it's his patient. He doesn't necessarily not want to share the medical record. We can talk about what is the medical record if you want, but also he wants to be aware of what's happened. And so he wants to be familiar with what the concern is or what the issue is that might have transpired, which necessitated somebody else to get access to that thing, which is completely reasonable, thing to want.
To a point, but why would it be made private? Like what's the argument?
It's private. It's private. It's not necessarily made private. It's more he wants to know what's happening. It's his job to have an understanding of what is happening to his patients.
Yeah.
And if someone can access the record without him knowing it, then he's not familiar or aware. I'll give you another quick example of the UX versus systems consideration. I was talking with a dermatologist, and he said to me, one of the great features I love about our system is the approve all function. I said, well, what do you mean approve all? He's like, oh, it's great. If I have a lot of medical records that I have to approve that I'm backed up on, I can just click a button to select all and it approves all of them automatically.
I knew you were going to say that.
I'm like, what? He's like, oh yeah, it's great. So from a UX perspective, awesome. From a clinical care perspective, well, what if there's errors in the medical record?
Yeah. Why is it asking you to approve them?
Right. So the idea of the workflow is he might dictate a medical record. It gets transcribed because I studied medical transcription. That transcriptionist then uploads it into the electronic health record system. He then is supposed to approve, double check it, verify it for accuracy,
Yeah.
and then approve it. Well, there is no verification. So now we have potentially an error in the medical record that not only resides in his office, but throughout the system for anybody else to access.
I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? So from a UX perspective, 2 thumbs up. Loved it. From a patient perspective and even a risk perspective, I'm not so sure that's so good.
Can I ask you a little bit more around how you teach the students to navigate those kind of quandaries? Because they're entering those workplaces where AI is going to be, we'd like to think an ally, but sometimes it's going to be on the other side of the table, challenging them with executive approval. And they're like, well, actually, these are the reasons why this is a better outcome here. Right. Is there something that you can actually add to that conversation that we as an audience and an industry really can maybe take as, I guess, just a kernel of information regarding dispute resolution? I think it's funny because on my podcast recently, I've had a few episodes on online dispute resolution and dispute resolution. It's a huge thing, though, and it's happening much, much more. Oh, absolutely. And so, again, education, right? And this goes into the sales part of it, that to do design, to do any marginalized kind of activity, you need to be able to communicate the value and worth of that activity to a broader audience in ways that they can understand. And I've experienced this as a sociologist at a business school. Why is sociology at a business school? Well, here's why. I have to explain it in terms that they understand. Translation becomes a key element of working as a marginalized profession in any industry. Okay. And so we have to educate out and talk about critical thinking, critical analysis, communication skills, collaboration skills, courage to try new things, creativity. These start to become essential elements of collaborating with AI so that we're not being replaced by it, but that we can show these higher level skills that this technology is not good at yet. And I think we're seeing this, right? If you look, it's really interesting to see the schizophrenia in the headlines. CEO replaces entire staff with AI. Next headline, CEOs fail to find value in increased productivity in AI. So you'll see 2 different headlines almost right next to each other. And so they're, people who are in leadership positions are trying to figure it out, and they need assistance in guiding those conversations. And I do think that academia plays an important role here if we're situated to talk with these elements in ways that they get. Absolutely. Because most academics can't. Yeah. And in my school, we're lucky that we do. You've got a podcast, Gary, that it's had a lot of people. Shung Lee, who I know, has been on the podcast, and there's lots of other people. Ali Fawkes, who's a good friend of the podcast, is going to be on your podcast. Can we just talk a bit more around, how long you've been doing it and what kind of guests you tend to have on the podcast? Yeah, just encouraged so we can give it a shout out and we can include that link to it in the show notes. Yeah, your audience can join my tens of listeners in. I don't know, it's tens of listeners. I'd seen it, so. Yeah. Well, the podcast is called Experience by Design Podcast, and the tagline is where we explore experience designs of all kinds. It was started by me and Adam Gamwell, who's a PhD in anthropology, design anthropologist, who has a PhD from Brandeis. He does a lot of great design work, and we've worked on projects together. And we started it over 6 years ago. And the reason why we started it in this way was because it would be easier to get guests rather than focusing on UX or CX or any particular area. Like, well, let's just kind of be general. Let's be broad. Experience design as a concept. And we
Adam had to drop off because of family and work stuff, and I just kept it going by myself. And so I have a range of guests. Like yesterday, I talked to a person who does hospitality experiences as travel and tourism that tries to capture local culture, values, flavor in engaging, immersive experiences that are actually relatively small scale, not tech heavy, but still impactful. In the morning, I talked to a person about the human experience and mindful experience with the amount of electrical activity in your brain at any particular time. And how do we then become more aware of that so we can have more mindful experiences that can lead to greater creativity, productivity, things like that.
Yeah.
So it really does cut across
You've
a
a super
broad range.
Super broad.
But the point, the theme, right, that ends up coming out of all of this, not surprisingly, it's about people, obviously. It's about people and their behaviors. And it's about people and their behaviors in trying to create experiences for them and their behaviors that can lead to some kind of change.
Yeah.
So no matter what we're doing as designers, it kind of starts to boil down to these particular elements. People matter. We need to understand who they are and their behaviors. We need to design intentionally to affect some kind of outcome.
Yeah.
So experience design becomes about that thing, right? Whether it's UX or CX or PX or student or employee or brand or digital or whatever. It becomes about those elements. And that's the key theme that all of my guests, in an uncoordinated way, all touch upon.
I'm going to put a link to Sheng-Hong Lee's episode. That was the one I listened to and I thought was very, very good. But I'll put a link to your episode or to your kind of, I'm a big Pocket Cast lover. So I'll put a link to it on Pocket Cast. I know you've got a page on your website. I'm just on it here at the moment where it lists out all the places where you can subscribe. Gary, if people want to connect with you and find out more information, are you on LinkedIn? I think you're
Absolutely
on LinkedIn.
Am, yeah.
You're on LinkedIn, yeah.
I'm probably the only design sociologist on LinkedIn. It says design sociologist.
So I'll put a link to your LinkedIn there for people to connect with you as well. But look, I wrap every episode on This Is HCD by thanking people for their time and energy, because we don't run a script on this. Like it's an open conversation, and a lot of the questions that I had today were fielded out of natural curiosity around sociology and design, and also navigating the complex world that we find ourselves in now. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask you a PhD in sociology, no doubt.
I know. How many of those are there? Too many, it turns out.
But you're the first one on the podcast, so gotta
be first somewhere.
It's but it has been great to speak with you and get to know you a little bit as well, because we've spoken a few times now at this stage. So thanks so much for coming on, Gary. I really, really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I love being on this end of the microphone, not having to ask the questions, just having to answer them. It's a different, more. I won't say more enjoyable, but
well, you're a natural.
Oh, thank you.
You know what I mean?
I appreciate it. I'm that part that's just naturally good at it.
Yeah, exactly. We'll stay in touch.
All right. Cheers.